What's going on, guys? In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to do one of the most trending haircuts that I see coming into my barbershop. I'm going to have some disconnect from the top and the sides. I'm also going to taper out the sides and the back. All right, so before I get started, I'm going to sanitize my tools using the Wahl Cleaning Clip. It's a 2-minute sanitizer. Now, as you guys may or may not know, a lot of the other sanitizers that you use to sanitize your tools take 10, some even take 15 minutes to work. So Wahl came out with the 2-minute sanitizer. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spray that on all the tools that I plan to use for this demonstration. All right, and then also I'm gonna use the Wahl clipper oil, and then I'm going to oil my clippers. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using the Wahl Cordless Detailer Li. I'm going to be using the Wahl Big Mag, the Wahl Cordless Magic Clip, and also the all-in-one blade for the Wahl Big Mag. I'm gonna be finishing off the edges with the finale and using my premium guides. So the first thing I'm gonna wanna do is I'm gonna wet the hair so that I can part it easier. Then I'm going to use my comb to section off the longer hair right at the parietal ridge. And then continue with a horseshoe part in the back. And then section off at the parietal ridge on the other side. So once I have the hair sectioned, I'm going to take some clips. I'm going to make sure to clip the hair so that it doesn't get in the way. Now all this hair that's longer on top, we're going to be trimming it later, so I just want to have a nice clean part going all the way around before I get started clipping around the sides. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my number 2 guide on my cordless magic clip with the lever back, and I'm going to start to trim all the bulk hair along the sides. Now as I do this, I'm just making sure that I'm going completely straight up and I'm not really C-scooping too much. And I'm making sure that the guideline that's put in is clean and even all the way through. Once again, I'm cutting just with the lever back with the number 2 attachment guide. Now I'm gonna take my flat top comb and the Big Mag with the blade setting all the way open. And I'm going to use clipper over comb to remove the bulk above the guideline that I just created. So I'm gonna slide in, I'm gonna angle it back, and then I'm gonna slide across with my Wahl Big Mag. See, I'm noticing where the actual bulk is. I'm sliding the comb in there until I can see the bulk, and then I'm removing it. Then I'm continuing to do that all the way around. So I'm sliding the comb in, I'm angling it back, and then I'm sliding across with the Wahl Big Mag. So now that I've gone and removed all the lines using my clipper over comb, I'm gonna go now and set my guidelines in for the actual taper. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off using my cordless detailer LI, and I'm gonna start at the back. So when I'm doing tapers, the first thing I wanna make sure is that I'm setting my guidelines in the right place. So what I do is I always use the bottom of the ear as my first initial guideline, and then I use the bend right here of the ear in order to create my second guideline. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my first guideline using my trimmer. And sometimes on the back of the neck, there's always a bunch of different hair patterns that the hair will move into. So when you go and you create this first step or this first guideline, if you use the method of making the line at the bottom of the ear, it actually removes a lot of the hairs that move in different directions. So it makes it a lot easier for you to fade out the back. And normally when I'm doing the first guideline, I like to leave a little bit of hair on the outsides, just so that when I'm going back and I'm edging it, I wanna make sure I have enough hair on the outsides to edge it to where it's gonna look clean. So if you see any of my videos that I have with me doing a skin taper on the back, I always leave some hair on the sides. And I also do that when I'm cutting the sides as well. So now I'm gonna take my magic clip with the lever back, and I'm gonna make my next guideline about 1 inch. And as you guys can see, I'm still continuing to leave a little bit of hair on the outside. That's just so that when I go back and I edge, I have enough hair. So now I'm gonna take my half attachment guide, and I'm going to put it on my magic clip with the lever back, and I'm gonna start to remove this guideline here. So now what I'm gonna envision is, as I start to go up, removing the guidelines, I wanna start to shrink the amount of hair that I'm cutting while I'm cutting it. So when I start with the half with the lever back, I'm only gonna go up just a tiny, tiny bit. And then when I get to the 1 attachment guide, I'm gonna wanna go up just a tiny bit more. So I'm gonna start with my lever back, and I'm just gonna flick at that line. See, I'm not really going in there and doing one of these. I'm kind of just flicking at the line like this. Now I hold my clipper very loose in my hand so that I can transition from going like this to going like this very easy. I can get a bunch of different levels of cutting by the clipper just by holding the clipper lightly in my hand. So that's all I'm doing. I'm pretty much just going like this at the line rather than going in completely. And now I'm just gonna close the setting a little bit to about halfway, and then work directly under that line. And then now I'm gonna fully close the lever and then work pretty much right on that first guideline, just to make sure any little dark spots are removed. But when I do this, I'm going at it in angles. I'm using corners of the blade, and I'm actually angling it in there just to lighten the dark spots. Now I'm going to take my 1 attachment guide, and I'm gonna start with the lever back as always. And all I wanna do is just go in there and lighten up a few of the dark spots that I see. It's actually starting to blend very well already, and I don't wanna create any lines that are unnecessary. So all I'm gonna do is doing the same exact thing. I'm just gonna use the front of the guide, and I'm just gonna like pretty much lift the hair up. So one of the coolest things I've learned is that if you cut with the guide touching the scalp like this and you move straight up and down, it'll actually cut it at a longer length. And then if you start to angle the clipper down and ride on this part of the guide, then it'll start to cut shorter. So what I do is, when I want to first touch the line, I first touch it up and down like this, with this part of the guide touching the head. And then if I need to cut a little bit shorter, it's just simply me angling the clipper down, rather than me having to continuously switch between guides. So I start like this, and then I start to angle like this to remove any darker hair that's pretty much under the line. So that's pretty much what you guys are gonna see me do a lot of. Okay, now I'm gonna go down and I'm going to remove this bottom line now. So if you guys remember from the beginning when I started and I put this first guideline in, that first guideline was about 1 inch. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna break that first guideline down into 4 1/4 inch increments. So we're gonna hit the line a 1/4 inch, tap this back. Hit the line a 1/4 inch, tap this back. Hit the line a 1/4 inch, and then tap this back 4 times in that line, so that we can move it up a 1/4 inch and eventually just blend it in. So I'm starting with my lever closed now, and I'm gonna tap that line just a 1/4 inch. And then I'm gonna move this back a 1/4 inch, and then tap the line again a 1/4 inch. And then I'm gonna tap it back one more time, and then continue on going a 1/4 inch higher than I just previously did. Now, as you're doing this, you wanna make sure that you're paying very close attention to the way that the hair is actually moving. You don't wanna just hit the lines completely all the way across, because if there's a hair that's moving in a different direction, it's gonna cut it shorter. So you wanna make sure that you're using only a corner of the blade and you're always cutting against the grain. So you'll see that I'm using the corners and I'm actually going at it in different angles, and that's because the back of his hair has a bunch of different ways that it's moving. So when I'm doing tapers, I always like to make sure that I have the blueprint set in right and the guidelines are set in right, and you know, everything is exactly the way it needs to be. So I always look at it from the side and I try to envision. Let me see if I can give you guys a good vision here. What I want to do is I want to make sure that this part that's faded connects with the back, but kind of through the ear. So I always look at the sides here and make sure that it's blended enough to where it can, like when you look at it from the side, this part of the taper and the back part of the taper actually looks like it's blending together, but just not connected around the ear. So that's pretty much what I envision when I'm doing, you know, the taper haircut. Now I'm just going to take my half guide and I'm gonna go in there and just do just a little bit of touch-up work. So anywhere that I see dark spots, I'm gonna just pull my lever back starting, and I'm gonna start to just lighten the dark spots to make the blend smoother. So that's pretty much the back faded in. I mean, once I go back and I line the edges, I may need to go back and do just a little bit of touch-up work, especially in the areas where I've left a lot of the darker hair. But that's fine, because as long as I know that the line's right and the shape's right, I could always go back and tweak it to make it look its best. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 3 attachment guide and I'm going to work right under where I did clipper over comb, just to make sure that it's transitioning as smooth as possible. So always starting with my lever back and then continuing all the way around. And if I see any little dark spots or anything like that, I'll just close my lever a little bit and just make sure that it's smooth. So you guys always gotta make sure that you remember that, you know, people's head aren't gonna be completely smooth. So you always gotta make sure that if there's a dent or something like that, you're lowering your lever to lighten the spot. So as I look, I can see everything starting to look really, really smooth. That's pretty much what I want here. I want to keep it real smooth. So now I'm going to go into fading the actual side. So I'm going to remove the sideburn for this demonstration. So the first thing I want to do is I want to just lightly tap the bottom of this edge line. And the reason being is because I don't want to pull it back, and I want to make sure that I'm leaving just a little bit of hair on the side as well so that I can edge it and it'll stay dark. And then I'm going to start my first guideline a little bit behind where the edge is going to actually be. And normally the first guideline will be kind of like if you were to take your comb and you would place it at the top of the ear like sunglasses, you would see that that's pretty much where the first guideline on the side is. So I want to make that guide really clean and crisp. And then remember, I want it to look like it's fading and blending in with the back. So my next step is I'm gonna take the cordless magic clip with my lever in the back setting as always, starting off. And then I'm gonna make my next guideline here. So when you're doing the tapers on the side, you wanna make sure that you're using only half of the blade. So envision the blade into two different parts. And normally you will use one part of it on one side, and then on the other side of the head, you'll use the other. So for this side, I'm gonna use the left side of my blade. And then I'm gonna use the right side now at a different angle just to make sure that everything is cut even and smooth. And unlike the back, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna knock out this bottom line here. So to do so, I'm just gonna start to close my lever a little bit, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing. 1/4 inch, move it back. 1/4 inch, move it back. 1/4 inch, move it back. And now I'm gonna take my attachment, my half attachment, and I'm going to pull my lever back, and I'm only gonna use 1 or 2 teeth, and I'm gonna flick, like his hair moves like this. It goes down and then around. So I'm gonna be flicking against the grain, making sure that I'm cutting against the grain. And I'm only gonna use just a few teeth. And then I'm gonna start to close my lever and remove just the dark spots. So as you guys can see, it's not really fading completely perfect, but that's fine. What I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna go in there and just on those dark spots, I'm gonna just lighten the dark spots only. So now that a lot of those dark spots are removed, I'm gonna go back with my detailer and I'm gonna flick down at that first guideline that I created. Now, what I wanna do is I wanna try to create contrast. So the more skin that's down here at the bottom, the more contrast the fade is gonna have. So I'm gonna just go back there and lightly flick at that line just to make sure that it's blended as close as it possibly can. All right, so now I'm gonna take my 1 attachment guide and I'm only going to lighten just a tiny bit of the hairs that I see exactly where the dark spot is. Now, once again, I'm going at it at that angle that I talked about earlier, just to lighten the hair just a tiny bit. If you can practice and master this technique, then you'll skip a lot of guides when you're actually cutting, making your haircuts a lot quicker. All right, so now before I go and edge it, I'm going to continue the exact same steps on the other side. Now with my half, lever back. The hair's growing back, so I'm going against the grain. And now I'm going to take my one attachment guide with my lever back, and then just using only this part of the blade. And like I said before, you're gonna have to go back and touch up a couple of spots. So I just wanna make sure that it's pretty much blended as good as it can just for the first draft. So now I'm gonna take my Detailer Li cordless and I'm gonna start to trim around the edges. Sometimes when you're doing the edge up, you'll have hairs that want to move all the time. If you put your finger like right on those hairs and you start to edge like that, it'll stop the hairs from moving when you're edging. And now I'm gonna go around the ear. And now for the back, what I want the edge up to look like is I want it to go around and then also look like it's coming back down, not going around and then going into the back and making it look round. So I always start off at this bottom corner, and then what I do is I kind of work my way up, but making sure that the hairline goes straight down. And then now you guys will see all the darker hairs that I was talking about earlier after the edge is already complete. So I'm gonna go back in there and I'm gonna just remove a lot of those hairs with my trimmer. And then when I go back and I do my touch-up work, I'll get a bunch of those dark spots. So I just wanna comb all the hair, make sure that the line is straight. And then we're gonna go around to the other side and try to do the exact same thing. And then I'm gonna go and just remove some of the darker hairs on the outside. Now when I'm edging the sides, I just want to make sure that I'm using my opposite hand in order to help control the trimmer. Now once I have that edged, I'll just knock out the dark hairs. I leave the dark hairs there in the beginning in order to know that I have enough hair to edge up. And then once I edge it up and I know exactly where the edge is gonna be, then I just start to remove the dark hairs. I'm only gonna touch just a little bit of this box right here, just so that it gives you a nice corner on the end. But I'm not gonna edge the front for this demonstration because I want the style to actually look more natural than have it sharp. So now I'm just gonna go in there, and on the dark spots, I'm just gonna touch them up a little bit, make sure everything looks smooth. Now when you're doing touch-up work, you always start with your lever back, and then you see exactly what it looks like when you cut like that, and then you start to close it a little bit if you need to. All right, once the taper's looking smooth, then we could go on to trimming the actual top. So to do this, first thing I'm gonna do is make sure that the hair is nice and wet again. First thing I'm gonna do is put a clean section down the middle. going to section at the apex. And then now I'm going to take my Wahl Big Mag with the setting closed, with the blade setting closed, and I'm going to trim just a section, a small section back here. And then this is going to be my guide for how much I trim off of the rest of the hair on the top. So then I'm gonna continue to go across, making sure to keep it completely straight. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to blunt cut all of this just to trim it to the length first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the all-in-one blade, and I'm going to show you guys how to add texture using the all-in-one blade. So the first thing I want to do is just get it to its desired length of exactly how long I want to actually have the hair, or how long he actually wants to have his hair, so that it's controllable. And then I'm going to go back. So once I have all the hair trimmed, I'm gonna create another section here, and another section here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the hair that I just cut as a guide, and I'm going to redirect that hair, and I'm gonna go trim going forward. So I'm using the hair as a guide, I'm over directing the hair. I'm just making sure that I'm blunt cutting and keeping all the hair even. So as you guys can see, the hair pops through. You can see where the hair behind it is actually that length. So I'm gonna go in there, take another small section, over direct the hair to the guide. And then as you guys can see here, you can see where the hair comes through. We're gonna chop that. We're gonna take another small section. We're gonna redirect that hair. And then we're just gonna create a blunt cut. And we're gonna do this all the way through to the front, making sure that all the hair is just evenly cut. Now once I have the middle, I'm going to start off by taking small sections again, and then I'm going to go over to the side. Take another small section, bring it back. As you guys can see, the hair pops out over the section. Take another small section. As you guys can see, I'm just going to continue to do that to make sure that all the hair is even. Alright, so now the hair on top should pretty much be all even. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hands in order to check it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my hands, just making sure that I check to see if there's any hairs that are ridiculously long or anything that was missed. Looks like we did a pretty good job here. And now I'm going to put the all-in-one blade on the Big Mag. As you guys can see, it clips on real easy, just a simple click there. Make sure that the blade setting's midway through. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to comb all the hair down. And I'm going to follow that same pattern, taking sections, and I'm going to just add a little bit of texture to it. So if you guys notice, the all-in-one blade got a bunch of gaps in it. And if you were to turn it on using your finger, you could go like this, and it doesn't cut all the hair, but it actually cuts some of it. And what that's doing is it's cutting the hair at a bunch of different lengths in order to create the texture. So for this style, the top is gonna be pretty much curly and, you know, like really messy. So the guidelines that the sections that I'm taking, they're pretty even and symmetrical, but I'm not super duper focused on the actual sectioning right now. I want to make sure that I'm adding the texture evenly into the right amount of hair. So I'm making sure that the sections are being symmetrical, but it's not super perfect right now. So I'm gonna use this technique to add a little bit of texture, and then I'm gonna show you guys another technique to add just a little bit more texture. And now once I created that texture like that, I'm gonna make sure that the hair stays damp. And I'm gonna pull the setting of the blade all the way back, and I'm actually just gonna use one or two of the teeth in order to remove, and add a little bit more movement and texture. And now what I'm doing is I'm seeing a lot of the hair that has weight, and I'm trying to just remove only the hairs that have a lot of weight on it. Alright, now that the texture's been added, I'm going to take my matte control cream from the Wahl 1919 line. I'm going to take just a little bit. I'm going to apply it to the hair prior to blow drying, just to give it a little bit of hold and a little bit of heat protection as I blow dry. So make sure that it's all the way through. And make sure that your front is nice and wet. So now I'm gonna take my diffuser. And now once I have it dried with the diffuser a little bit, I'm gonna go in there with my brush, and I'm actually just gonna start to direct the hair in the actual direction that I want it to lay. Now I didn't want to use the brush and create tension and make it to where it's super straight. I wanted to leave kind of the natural wave that he had. So now I'm just going in there and I'm like controlling exactly the way the hair moves. And then now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use cold air and actually just try to lock the hair exactly where it's at. Now that the style's pretty much locked into place, I'm gonna take a little bit more of the matte cream, the control cream, and I just wanna make sure that I get all these little flyaway hairs and make sure that the separation on the front is actually nice. Got some nice movement, some natural curls, wave. So when I'm styling or when I'm cutting hair, I want to make sure that the blend is super crispy and super clean, but then the top is messy and looks like, all right, you know, he barely tried to do his hair. And for me, I just feel like that complements each other very well when you have something that's very, very clean, but then you also have something that's super messy. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here. I'm just giving him like a nice messy bedhead look, something that, you know, looks very minimal. I didn't want to touch any of the front. I want to make sure to leave his hairline natural so that it complements this actual messy look on top. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my finale and I'm just going to touch the bottom of the taper just so that we get just a little bit more pop. And also I'm going to go just around the edges to remove any of the hair that I edged up. Manipulating your hair, bro, is a mission. He's like, I know, I deal with it every day. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's just how you would do a taper. You have a messy style on top, which is very, very, very trending right now. And you know, nice clean edges, a nice clean blend. And pretty much you just go in there and, you know, fix up the little hairs to make them look cool, you know? So that's it, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.